And first up, we have Sheriff Marnelli and her team. They have 5 items. We've got 25 minutes for this particular agenda item. Welcome back. Good to see you both. And we'll turn it over to you to walk us through the 5 items.
I'm David Cribbs. I'm the Budget and Finance Director for the Sheriff's Office.
I'm Sheriff Reggie Marnelli.
Good to see you both.
So the first item we have is recognizing an intergovernmental agreement we've entered into with the town of Morrison. And this would allow us to receive and expend some funds from them as they have shut down their town police department. And our agreement is with them to take over some of those law enforcement functions. The amount is of the agreement is for $470,256. So allow us to, again, receive those funds and expend them. And so we're asking that you would support a supplemental to add that to the appropriation to our budget.
Great. Commissioners, any questions on item 1?
Just a little bit of the logistics. Do we end up, what was the size of Morrison's police force when they stopped having a police force?
Don't quote me on this, but I think it was 3 or 4 full-time and upwards of 13 or 14 part-time.
And so what does it look like for us to take this over? Is that kind of a one for one or?
No. We've already taken it over. We were doing all of their law enforcement anyway on basically graveyards. And so we just expanded and took their day shift and swing shift from them. And so we've rearranged our districts in the South Precinct to where a deputy is now assigned up in the Morrison area. And so it was just some rearranging for us. The call load was not anything that we could not handle with our current staffing. In a perfect world, we would like to add more deputies to be able to cover that. However, the effect was not that much on us.
Okay.
At this point in time.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? In support?
Thumbs up from me.
All 3 in support. Thank you.
Then next item relates to our deputy sheriff trainees and the retirement system that they're not a part of right now, or the one that they. So this appears to have been kind of an oversight back in the last time the system was changed. But back in January, county staff had reached out to us expressing concerns about how that system is handled. So if we've got a detention specialist who then goes to the academy to become a sworn or to become a deputy, or they basically, as a detention specialist, they're in the peace officer retirement training or peace officer retirement system. And then when they go into the academy, they come out of that retirement system for the 11 or 21 weeks, depending on the particular academy that they're in. And then they go back in to that retirement system. It's administratively cumbersome. And because of the scheduling problems we have with our academies, they're more often than not ending in mid-payroll, which the county payroll hates that. And so they're having to make these weird changes mid-payroll of PB, not only the leave accrual, but the pay and the retirement system. The cost to just call the trainees are going to be in the retirement system when they come out anyhow, just getting them in 11 to 21 weeks early or covering that gap is pretty negligible. The additional cost is $286 for an 11-week academy per employee and about $545 for a 21-week academy. We're already, the trainee positions are about $10,000 a year, $9,000 a year less in salary than the position they're going into. So we're already recognizing a little savings there. So it just seemed to make sense to let's just move them, just call them or move them into the peace officer retirement system while they're trainees. And then the next step of this is if you all bless this, then we have to take this to the personnel board as well to get those changes made. But that's the proposal that we're asking. We're not really seeing this as any additional cost, but we're asking for your approval on this concept.
Sure. Commissioners, I'm comfortable with this recommendation. Any comments or questions?
From
Thumbs up as well. 3 in support.
Excellent. Well, and the next three are the types of things I'm here all the time on.
Okay,
So, three quick
grants.
grants. So, first one is the impaired driving grant from the Colorado Department of Transportation. We're just asking for you to approve us. This is actually, normally we try to get your approval before we submit a grant application. This was actually due on April 18th. So if you didn't want to support it, we could withdraw it. But in the meantime, it's for $15,000 to provide funding for us to cover some overtime and the fringe benefits associated with that, some training costs and some additional patrol shifts to combat impaired driving through additional enforcement. Again, it's $15,000. There's no match required. So we're just seeking your endorsement of that application and then the eventual supplemental approval if we get the grant, which historically we have.
Anyone opposed? So just to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah.
All three in favor. Next.
The next one is for a speed mitigation grant. Again, this is one we've been receiving for 10 years from at least the last 10 years from the Colorado Department of Transportation. Another one that was due back on April 18th. It again pays for overtime benefits and some additional shifts for us to do speed enforcement. It's a $65,000 grant. No match is required.
In big support of this one. I know this continues to be a challenge for us across the county, especially as we see that the racing that we hear from our constituents about and more. So I think that anything we can do to help complement what you're already doing.
We will
feels
have
great.
some news in the near future.
Very
Something
exciting.
else that we're going to be doing with that.
Excellent. Thank you. All in support? Thumbs up. All right, great. And we'll go to the final. grant.
Last one is a Behavioral Health Administration Jail-Based Behavioral Services Program grant. Grant application comes from the state of Colorado Behavioral Health Administration. It would be for $590,000 and cover a period of July 1st, 2025 through June 30, 2026. This covers a lot of services in the jail from multiple providers. It provides funding for 2 to 3 substance abuse counselors. It provides a case manager to assist with resources and stability for inmates when they're released. It allows for 1 to 2 mental health counselors who help diagnose individuals and arrange appropriate resources in and outside of the jail for medication and ongoing treatment. The final part is a medication assisted treatment program, which provides a nurse to administer appropriate medications and to allow for individuals to hopefully minimize the risk of relapse and overdose when they get out back into the community. So this, and then finally it covers funding, 100% funding of salary and benefits for the coordinator of that program. So it's about $295,000 in 2025 and $295,000 in 2026. So we're just asking for your support in requesting this grant. And then if we receive it, which again, we have in the past, that we would get a supplemental appropriation to reflect those grant revenues.
I will tell you, it's times like these when I'm particularly grateful for Jeffco Voters for approving 1A. That this is a significant grant at nearly $300,000 to do important work. So any questions or concerns?
Questions, thumbs up.
Okay, all three in support. Thank you.
Well,
both
thank you
for
very
being
much.
here. Next, we're going to move to a topic that I think has been on all of our minds, and the Board of County Commissioners asked Joe and the team to ensure that we have regular conversations about the constantly shifting and changing landscape at the federal level and how those executive orders impact the services and programs that are critical to Jeffco residents. What does that look like? And how do we factor that into our upcoming budget decision packages, as well as dollars that are appropriate for 1A allocation as well. So we have with us today Dan Conway and Carrie Markle to give us an update on the task force, learn more about what you're focusing on, next steps, what you're hearing, what we need to be aware of now and more. And I believe we have 30 minutes for this item.
Great. Well, good morning, commissioners. So to provide some background for those listening in, we have established internally an executive order task force. And the task is to monitor, assess, and evaluate the impacts of the executive orders and those resulting actions that are being taken by federal funding. This task force will be providing bi-weekly updates or as scheduling permits based on calendars to the Board of County Commissioners on those findings and providing any notable developments. The composition of this task force includes representatives from the county attorney's office, the strategy, innovation, and finance department, public affairs, and the county manager's office. And the grants management team, which is part of the SIF department, serves as the lead for those tracking, evaluation, and data components that will help inform the task force analysis and recommendations. So as of April 30th, the county has confirmed a total loss of about 5.9 million, just shy of 6 million in federal funding. And I'll speak on this in detail a little bit further. An additional $39 million of this funding is under active monitoring due to recent federal communications. And I'll also speak to that in a little further detail. I would like to make a note of correction on the briefing paper. In the discussion section, last sentence, or second to last sentence, it states confirmed losses at a risk funding is 11,793,000. That should actually be 45,072,000, the same figure that's represented in the table shortly below that. That was an oversight in our team showing an earlier version of that data point. So that's just a narrative sentence that
Dan, I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time? I have the briefing paper up
it's the second to last sentence, kind of spills into the next page.
before the chart.
Before the chart, it says the sentence is the total potential impact of the county from confirmed losses in at-risk funding should be 45,072,003. That's just to be in line with the table that was identified below. As part of this update, what we are looking to do is not only share this information from the board, but at this stage, ask if there's additional information that you would like to see. If this format works for you, this is the first time we've done this, so we want to make sure we're meeting the needs as we move forward. I do want to call out that the task force is also exploring some methods to increase the accessibility and transparency of the data that we acquire. We're looking at options like developing an online dashboard using Power BI and that visualization tool. We're also working with public affairs to engage our community stakeholders to kind of gauge broader impacts of those executive orders on the broader community, not just Jefferson County government. Part of that end, we're developing a survey tool and we're hoping to launch that by mid-May. And the idea is to distribute that to our community partners and kind of keep that open so we can get information of that communication channel as we go forward in time. So with that, I want to call out a few items of note. You should have in your packet a summary document. It's attachment A, I believe, to the briefing paper. And it again summarizes the same data points, but it also pulls together some of the components by county department. And the first one that I want to mention is with the development and transportation. United States Department of Transportation has issued a notice to cease DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion activities that are considered to be in violation of federal law. I want to hand it over to Carrie Markle to touch a little bit about the legality aspect of DEI, if you would.
So currently, commissioners, we are proceeding as we have been since January. Nothing has changed from our view from the standpoint. The county does not engage in illegal DEI. There's currently litigation pending, and we are moving forward with the direction of until there's a finality to that litigation, that there's nothing further that we need to be concerned about. The work that the task force is doing is monitoring the situation daily. So if something were to change, that would change that advice, we would certainly convene an executive session.
Thank you.
I also mentioned that the Department of Transportation has also issued a directive requiring cooperation with ICE and instructing agencies not to impede its operations. Moving on to human services, the SNAP, or Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. The federal government is shifting SNAP administrative costs to states with a state match requirement under consideration anywhere from 5, 10, or 25%. And what this means in turn with that match requirement would be passed on to counties because the state doesn't have the resources to, as we anticipate, to cover that match requirement. So to give you context, the total annual SNAP benefits that our county administers to our community is about $87 million. So if we were to pick up at most, at the max end, a 25% match, that would require $21 million to be covered by county resources. These are in monitor status. These are not confirmed. These are things we are monitoring. Another one is the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. It used to be called LEAP, but I think they added in an extra couple letters in there. Right. So that is being under consideration for full elimination. To give you a context, we currently provide about $450,000 of energy assistance to our community. The next one is the Social Services Block Grant. Commissioner Zesinger, you referenced this morning. This is a perfect example of the rapidity of how these things change. When we drafted up this briefing paper, that was still kind of on the table for being reduced. As we heard now, it may be safe for now. So that's just a context point I want to share with the board, that the information we provide to you while we're tracking it daily, the sequence of getting the documents and briefing and scheduling may be a little bit behind by the time we get to you. But at that point in time, it was being considered for reduction. I just want to share with you, in case that goes back, for 2024, that block grant, the Social Services Block Grant, contributed about $1.6 million to the child welfare allocation. That's about 6% of that funding source. It also received about $6,500, not a huge amount, to the Child Care Assistance Program. That's largely funded by state dollars. And then also received about $190,000 for adult protection. So it kind of gives you a sense of how that Social Services Block Grant feeds into several different programs. Also wanted to mention in terms of some legal and executive actions, and these are just some highlights. There's lots of other areas. There's TANF and there's lots of other factors, and they are summarized in your sheet here. So in terms of the legal executive actions, and Carrie, feel free to add on to these as I go through it. But a lawsuit has been filed against the state of Colorado. Jefferson County
Is
is
this
not.
as it relates to human services or just legal in general?
This is going to be kind of capturing general, but I think this one particularly was around human services.
Okay.
But yeah,
Because I had two that are not on here.
Yeah.
For human services that I think we do need to be aware of.
Okay.
That I wanted to add.
please.
So very specifically, we got word over the weekend about the changes to Medicaid, in particular, the work requirements feature that is heavily featured in the package, which would also include community engagement requirements. This is 80 hours a month that would have to be verified. And we know that the estimated cost of the state is going to be approximately $57 million to administer, likely more. If it's $57 million to administer on the state side, then a portion of that's going to come back to the counties as well. And so the cost will be pretty substantial to us on top of that. And they're proposing to require Medicaid redeterminations at least twice a year, which would further overwhelm our county capacity and add additional cost. So I want to make sure that we get that added to this. And that's all for now. I just, before we moved on,
Yeah,
for
thank
the legal component, I wanted to bring that up.
Appreciate that. Yeah, we'll definitely get that added. We'll definitely check with the team. I'm probably sure they've already beat me to it and is in there, but again, with the timing of getting this document for this, but thank you for mentioning that as well. So as I was saying, a lawsuit has been filed against the state of Colorado, and I want to specify Jefferson County is not named in that suit. There are several executive orders that are being monitored for some potential local impacts. One is Proclamation 10886, which declares a national emergency at the southern border. The other is Executive Order 14157, which is labeled Protecting the American People Against Invasion, and Executive Order 14278, which is labeled Protecting American Communities from Criminal Aliens. And again, Jefferson County is not named, but may be affected. So that gives you some samples of some of the orders that are being currently monitored. We are looking for developments for any, and really calling out to see if there's any direct or indirect impacts, but we haven't yet received any federal state direction that's asking us to take immediate action at this point on those things. One thing that we want to also mention is the tariff impacts. So we are beginning to see tariff impacts on our procurement and materials. The challenge that we're starting to identify with trying to call that out is that some of them are not consistently identifiable. So some of those costs are rolled into the rates we receive. Some are itemized. So it's kind of across the board depending on what the vendor and supplier provides us. So at this point, it's we do see some raw data. Some of it's anecdotal, but we're flagging it and we're trying to see if we can track it and get our hands around it. But that's kind of a larger aspect that we're also trying to monitor.
So Dan, just to clarify, too soon to say whether as we ramp up for infrastructure projects, road and bridge, culverts and more, especially given 1A dollars for that work, whether those, I'm sure the tariffs are going to impact the materials and resources that are needed for those infrastructure projects. There's no question about it. We've talked about that impact in the Housing Advocacy Committee, as well as we look at materials and supplies for affordable housing, and what that might mean for lumber and more. So just to be clear, we know that tariffs will have an impact. We're already beginning to see that in terms of procurement and materials, but we're trying to get a clearer picture of what that looks like regarding actual costs, how sustained it may be, and where it may hit the hardest.
Right. And I'll be candid. I'm not sure that's going to be fully attainable because some of it is buried into rates and we would have to call up every provider vendor say in there. They may not bill themselves.
Okay.
But the things that we can identify, we will. But figure out it.
Yeah, and I guess the big issue for us is just, continuing to have an awareness around that as we allocate those 1A dollars. We're already looking at significant costs due to deferred maintenance over a significant period of time as well. And now we may have this added cost as the 2. So
Yeah.
that's something toward the end we can circle back to regarding what's missing or additional factors we have to
Right.
consider. So
And to be clear, we are seeing some things. Some things are itemized and we can see it. I'm just very cautious always about making an assumption that if we see a cost increase, that it's attributable to that factor, because there could be other factors that drive up a price any given year. So we want to make sure that we're driven at that information based on data, not presumption. But some areas we are clearly seeing it.
right.
I did want to mention, kind of circle back then to the confirmed losses of revenue. We had about 5.9 million, just shy of 6 million. The largest portion of that was in development and transportation. We had a soil slope stabilization project grant. It was called the BRIC grant. I'm going to get some page that was able to. So that was pulled, and the airport is planning to use existing resources to continue forward with that project. And then the other component was a much smaller amount, but it was about $40,000 for the Inflation Reduction Act. And that would have provided tax credit for emergency or energy efficiency projects. We had it identified as confirmed, but now it's more of a soft confirm. It's kind of like that might have opportunity to be funded again. So it's another example of, even though we get some fine things, it just kind of reverses on us. So those are the kind of the 2 areas. The rest, again, that large $39 million that we identified in potential loss of federal funding, a good chunk of that I did include the social services block grant, but again, that's maybe pulled back from that table. But at a high level, at least kind of gives you a general scale of potential impact. We're in the $45 million range as of the date of this April 30th report. But again, it's a constantly changing landscape. So that was kind of the summary of the data and items we have so far. I think the main takeaway here is that we haven't seen any clear direction for us to take action on yet, other than making sure that we're monitoring and anticipating large impacts. But of course, with every executive order that seems to come out, it seems like it follows with some sort of legal action to see if it can move forward. So there's a lot of wait and see, unfortunately, and it creates a lot of uncertainty and confusion about programming and service delivery. So that's kind of where we're at this stage in the tracking of these items.
Dan, we heard Commissioner Zenzinger add a couple of additions that I thought were great, and Commissioner Kerr may have some more too. I also wanted to flag for us the BRIC grant as it relates to wildfire resiliency. get everything aligned with our new community wildfire protection plan and other strategies that we have since put in place to make Jefferson County a more attractive county for that very competitive BRIC grant, which has significant dollars behind it. And we also know that there are some changes regarding FEMA. We saw an email recently from Nate Whittington, our Emergency Management Services Director, noting that the biggest takeaway is much more of the pressure and funding for wildfire and everything associated with it will now fall on the shoulders of the state and the counties. And we know that those costs are exorbitant when you have a fire like the Quarry Fire, for example. And typically it escalates up to the federal government, but that is also a bit like the Wild West right now. And it's the only consistent thing is the inconsistency around the direction of that funding and what the impact could potentially be for us. And I think that's also important for us to factor into those 1A conversations as we think about everything that 1A touches in those two major categories. I'm glad we're beefing up, as the sheriff talked about, our management and emergency services team, because we'll need that expertise moving forward. But I'd like to see us also factor in a category potentially for wildfire resiliency as we get more awareness of these issues. We're also tracking it through the Colorado Fire Commission. And then the only other thing I'd like to put on the table for us to consider are also the job losses that we're seeing. We just saw that NREL was going to cut about, I think, 116 jobs, a little more than 100 jobs. The federal center as well as
114, but.
thank you, 114.
Who's counting?
Mr. We still have to approve the minutes as well. You're on top of it this morning. It's very good. So I think also thinking about job losses, which then have a ripple impact across our economy, our local economy and more, might be another component of this as we continue to do this work. Those are just two more I'd add. Any other thoughts? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, so I have three things. One, I'm fairly sure is impossible, but I'm going to bring it up anyways. One, I think is very possible, and one, I'm not sure about. So you asked for feedback on this, and so the two different charts and everything. I'm wondering if this is kind of goes along with the confirmed or monitoring impact, but I think it goes a little more specific. I'm wondering if there's a way of doing basically how likely are these to happen? A scale of 1 to 10 or something like that. So this is the impossible one. I mean, at this point, we might as well roll dice. And like you said, every single executive order almost immediately is met with a lawsuit, and some of those lawsuits have been upheld almost immediately. Some are overturned almost immediately, but most of them are. So I realize that this trying to put out there how likely these are to happen or not is practically impossible. But if maybe we can brainstorm some way looking at, I mean, as we get further into this budget year and everything and seeing, so maybe some of these lawsuits, we find a pattern to how it's happening and say, yeah, these are likely to be upheld, but at a lower level or something like that. So that's my impossible ask is, can we add something along the lines of how likely? The thing that I think wouldn't be too difficult to add in is to actually list some of the negative impacts. So, I mean, just for example, the BRIC grant and the slope stabilization, if we don't do this, so the almost $6 million or $5 million isn't coming in. If we don't do this, the slope becomes unstable. It's a flooding issue. It's a water quality issue. It's perhaps I know we probably have some constituents who would be okay with it, could affect the operations at the airport. So maybe so you have your description and funding issue column, but I'm wondering if we could even get a little bit more specific as to, and this is either the confirmed or the potentials, if we don't get this and this money, what are the, I mean, SNAP, I mean, 21 million. You said a number larger than 21 million.
Well, it's the service that we provide, the benefits that are provided are about 87 million, but if the match is passed on to us.
The match,
up
okay.
to 21 million.
Okay. Yeah, so, and you kind of say it says provides help paying for groceries. So, I mean, that one's kind of obvious. If it's not there, people aren't going to be able to pay for the groceries. So if we can do something, just mentioning negative impacts if when this funding doesn't come in. Third one, so under, as I've been hearing about the Medicaid reductions possibly happening, that it looks like a piece of it might be to really up the work requirement piece that states have to enforce and stuff. And that will create a cost at the state and county level if we have to administer and enforce work requirements. So so looking at what's the additional costs to the county if some of these things happen? What additional costs are, do our Health and Human Services folks have to create a whole new, have to hire 10 people to enforce work requirements? Maybe that's right there. We can hire the SNAP or the Medicaid recipients to come in and enforce the work requirements on themselves. And I know that's sarcastic and I'm sure some would say mean-spirited, but that's what we're talking about here, is requiring people who obviously need some kind of assistance and aid that go find some childcare and come in and work. So I don't
Go
know.
to Head Start, because there won't be Head Start classes.
Right.
Or CCAP.
Right.
Yeah,
because-
so, and we can just,
Obliterate that.
and so this one I think is possible too, but it's also a can of worms. There's so many things. So
Actually, I just forwarded a memo about the very thing that talks about the cost, the potential cost and why.
Right.
What it's related to the redeterminations and the staffing around that, and then the time. It increases the time to delivery for everybody else that is in the system, because this doesn't come with more funding in order to do the additional work. It just creates backlogs for the work that we're already doing, which we're, just got caught up on, by the way.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
in all of the three, I mean, all of them, all three could just create huge new thing. I'm not asking for that, but if we could try and brainstorm how likely pieces, brainstorm a few, or list out a few of the potential negative impacts of not getting these, and then looking at potential additional costs, which at the, if we end up with additional costs, we will have to cut somewhere else. So all kind of fits together.
So yeah, we'll bring these all back to the task force and we'll brainstorm on, see how much is feasible and
Thank you.
some ideas.
That's everything. Ethan.
Do you want me to? That would probably be enough.
That was great. Thank you very much. Commissioner Setzinger.
Another area that will be impacted by the shift in Medicaid is going to be to the mental health centers. And in particular, one of the cuts that's on the table right now is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA. And coupled with the cuts to Medicaid are going to create a lot of difficulty for places like the Jefferson Center for Mental Health, one of our Medicaid facilities. That's going to eat into their operating and their ability to fully reach and increase the impact for their client base. So I know that that's one of those tertiary ones, but it does have some significance. And I just want to kind of set the table a little bit for that. Because right now the Jefferson Center is trying to move forward with that really fantastic project, the Solteria Landing project. And which is really an example of how to do things correctly, wraparound support services for mental and behavioral health and substance abuse. It's going to be right here. We've already been briefed on the project a little bit. They're working toward, funding the whole project, and they have a plan going. But any impact on the operational side puts those kinds of projects in jeopardy because they have to shift resources. They have to think, now we are not financially stable enough to our lenders that we are courting to try and see this project through to completion. So we did talk about this at length at our board meeting last week. And they did reach out and request a meeting with me, which I had yesterday, to discuss the future of that Solteria Landing and some of the concerns that they have with regard to their funding package and how they're looking to complete it. And they have requested some assistance, guidance, partnership, thought partnership from the county to kind of think through, are there ways that we might be able to support them either financially, cash-wise, and or just through the benefit of our backing in order to make sure that they are in a strong position for their lenders. So that they can get the grants that they're applying for, so that they can get the loans that they are applying for. And it's complicated, but any impact or cuts to the Medicaid side of things or to the SAMHSA just makes them more vulnerable to not being able to see that through to completion. So I just wanted to let you know that I had that conversation. I did talk to our county manager about it. He's gonna work with them a little bit just to kind of get a broader understanding about that project in particular and see if there are any opportunities for partnership to bring forward to the board for consideration. But it's those kinds of things, again, sort of tertiary, but not, because we rely heavily on a lot of the functions that take place at these nonprofits, the Action Center, Family Tree, DDRC, Community Table. Well, and going to the DDRC, that is another example of any kind of significant cuts to Medicaid are going to impact our families with disabilities, and it's going to impact our ability to meet their needs. So again, not directly with the county, but very much fits under this banner of human services that we have strong partnerships and relationships with in the county. So much so that, one of our board assignments is to sit on those boards so that we can be aware of these kinds of impacts.
And I think for me, that also further underscores how important it is for us to think about, in addition to what Andy said, the impact, if we don't have those dollars, how does that impact our community? How does that affect me as a resident of Jefferson County? But to Rachel's point and some other comments that have been made by all three of us, how does that affect different pots of money? So when we talk about Solteria, my ears immediately perk up as the chair of the Gateway to the Rockies Opioid Council, which has talked with JCMH, as the commissioners know, because we approved it together, for additional funding on a capital side to get this development up and running, which is desperately needed in our community, as we tackle issues tied to the opioid epidemic. But again, it's also looking at, so that affects the Gateway to the Rockies Opioid Regional Fund. It could potentially affect the Jeffco Opioid Council Fund. There are other county funds that I think they've tapped, either Gilpin or Clear Creek, I forget which one, for dollars. It affects the 1A fund. And also, Commissioner Zenzinger mentioned DDRC. So NCAP is the fund that we use to help allocate dollars to those nonprofits who we know are more efficient, more effective, and have deep expertise around the issues that the county supports, because they can do better than government. And there will certainly be implications for the NCAP fund. All of this means that we have to think strategically about these different funds and the impacts as these components come down. I do think continuing to do this bi-monthly is critical. I don't think we need to go through everything each time, but I do think flagging new items is particularly helpful, or circling back to say, hey, remember we said this might happen, it actually did. So I know we've got to end. We're out of time for this item. But I also, just on behalf of the board, want to share a huge thank you with Carrie, Dan, all members of this task force. This is no easy lift because everything is changing so quickly, and we just appreciate your eyes on it, your expertise on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then next, we will go to our clerk and recorder. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. We have with us Peg Pearl. And Peg, do you have any other members of your team with us today?
I have Cindy Bothberg here, our clerk and recorder finance director.
Good to see you. Nice to see the both. And we have clerk and recorder SIPA micro grant application. Please go ahead.
Great. And thank you for having me here this morning, commissioners. I do want to start with just a brief moment of personal privilege here, which is that our finance director, Cindy, is retiring at the end of the month after service to the county and Jeffco schools. So I just want to thank her for her service and all the work that she's done for the county here. This will be her last briefing appearing with you guys, so she won't be here during the upcoming budget season, and we will be missing her dearly.
Oh, thank you for your service. Thank you.
So, not how I was going to do that, which makes it the best. So, we are here this morning to flag for you and let you know about a grant opportunity that we're very excited about, working with BIT for a SIPA grant up to $10,000, and for your support with the grant application and the supplemental if needed, if we get the grant. And this is specifically going to be something that we've discussed a lot within the clerk's office of how to help with our residents who come into this building every day of the week, including Fridays. So this would be for a resident digital wayfinding and services like kiosks that we would be having here in the building. And specifically, this will be an opportunity for us to be able to help residents, like I said, every day of the week. The clerk and recorder's office is one of the busiest offices here with foot traffic between January 1st and October 30th. We've seen 14,033 people in person here just in our admin locations of motor vehicle clerk and recorder recording office. That's about 3,500 per month on average and about 218 per day. And those are the people that we see in our offices upstairs who we actually can help with services. That does not count the people who come into our offices because they're there accidentally. Our office has the wonderful joy of being able to be where you can get your marriage license, but we are fine with the fact that we are not where you get your divorces. And so we have lots of people who just think those things go together because there's actually two clerk's offices in the building. Same thing with name changes, for example. So we have a lot of folks who come all the way up to our office at the far end of the second floor and are actually looking for a name change or divorce records. And there's very common items that we're constantly sending people over to the court side. Luckily, also, we refer people to our partners at the assessors and the treasurers. They're at least on the same floor. But we do have that often as well. We do know that residents are often asking our sheriff's deputies downstairs for directions, which we appreciate their help. And even our coffee cart vendor is amazingly well-versed where everything is in this building, which I love that she does. And additionally, the clerk's office has the challenge that during election time, we only offer some services in this building, like our drop box. But if you want to vote in person, or if you want to update your voter registration in a more efficient, direct way, that's actually in the lair of our building. So all of these things together, we've been working with BIT for a solution for the SIPA grant to be able to put in a digital kiosk. And what this would be able to do is Monday through Thursday, it would be able to help residents say, hey, I'm here for a divorce license. Push the button, it would tell you where to go. And then in addition, on Fridays, because we have seen through some of our special events that there are a lot of people coming in on a Friday, our office is very pleased to be able to offer a lot of services that can be done online. And we were working with BIT to be able to program this kiosk to basically be able to do those services here in the lobby. So on a Friday, if someone come in, they could actually do their voter registration, or they could renew their license plate, or they could search our digital archives, which right now you can get your records back to 1954 and soon all the way back to the 1850s. So there would be actual services that they could do themselves and just be emailing that to themselves on a Friday and not feel like they've wasted a trip. And then Monday through Thursday, it would definitely help with wayfinding either within the building or potentially to the Laramie building if they're looking for election services. So we do think this 5-day-a-week support would be helpful for constituents. We're also working with BIT to make sure that this programming would make accessible to constituents limiting English. It would be bilingual. It will also have all sorts of ADA accessibility and other types of issues built in from the beginning as well. So we are excited to be working on this project with BIT. We're looking at models right now. The way this works is we're not committing to any particular model at this point. We're just speccing it out for the grant. And then if we're awarded the grant in April, we'll be working with BIT and facilities through the process. We've already had conversations with Mark Danner and others who are on board with the project, and we'll be picking the exact model, the exact programming, and all those things if we get the grant in the fall. And then the clerk's office will assume any ongoing annual licensing of the software, for example, and maintenance costs as part of our ongoing annual budget, our public education / remote services budget that we already have. So that's basically the idea. We're excited to be working with our county partners on it, and we're looking for your support.
Great. Super exciting to hear that we're just more ways to make it easier for residents who are coming to Jeffco or coming to Jeffco. Terrific. All in support?
So,
Yes.
Any
and,
questions? Sorry.
From my former life, we had research from the State Department, DMV, around the popularity of the kiosks.
Mhm.
It is the highest, most well-performing, well-liked component of county government when it comes to the DMV and other services that are available through the kiosks, and they are super, super popular. And then also very time saving for people. It has made their satisfaction rates for government increase greatly. So
That's great.
Yeah, no, we
we
definitely
have a lot of proof around that.
Yeah, we definitely see that every day in the motor vehicle office. And I'll just let you know now that you're on this side of the conversation, anyone who does those transactions at the motor vehicle kiosk in King Super, our office upstairs actually does do the second half of the back end of that transaction. Cindy's team does the finance to make sure that all those credit cards don't bounce when they go through the kiosk, and to do the reconciling. So we still touch every single one of those transactions in some way with our staff upstairs. They've just adjusted the skill set needed to do that. So we definitely know how many come in for sure, because we're seeing all these in-person people, and we're also processing those kiosk transactions every day. It's a great service.
yeah, it was, one of the maybe unintended consequences, positive consequences of folks, it just being more convenient for folks to get their license, their motor vehicle license and everything updated, is that it removes the excuse that when you get pulled over for your tabs being expired or an out of, you have a driver's license, a Colorado driver's license, and it's like you've lived in Colorado for decades and you're driving a car with out-of-state plates. I believe the excuse, I just couldn't get an appointment, or, every time I go in, and so you can't use that excuse anymore. And I think we have a whole generation, and I'm very bad at figuring out Gen Z versus all of that. I know greatest generation and Gen X, I don't know, but I think our last couple of generations coming in who are doing this, they don't even have that thing that us old folks do about, I have to go get my driver's license, or I have to go to the DMV. Just that negative connotation of I'm gonna waste half my day at the kids these days don't even have that attitude. And they're like, just boop, 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 it's done.
Yeah.
They have to go figure out something else for excuses.
Yeah, we've got a pretty good system here in Colorado, and it allows us to be able to keep those stickers that help remind you. Some states have gotten rid of those stickers, but it actually helps remind you when your plates are up to due. And so I think because we have a way of getting it more conveniently delivered to you, and the next step is coming, which is by July of next year, July of 2026, after we roll out the whole new version of the drive system, state law is requiring the state to support support us being able to send electronic notifications instead of those postcards.
Love it.
So finally.
Rachel's bill.
Yes, exactly. We love it. We're happy for that. As someone who spends $70,000 a month in postage, I'm happy.
I mean, it's an opt-in.
It's an opt, but we know lots of people want to opt in. And in fact, we're gathering emails already now from people who are interested and waiting with bated breath. So we're excited to implement that next stage.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Peg. We appreciate you and Clerk Gonzalez. Congratulations on retirement. Thank you for all of your service.
That was very nice.
And we're very happy to have you both
Okay,
here
well,
this
thank you
morning.
for your
Thank you, and
support.
all three in support.
Oh,
All right, next up, we have strategy, innovation, and finance, and we actually have 75 minutes allotted for this conversation. It looks, yeah. It looks like we have 4 items that we're going to be talking about. And Dan is coming forward, and I know you have a number of team members who will be joining you for the first item, which is the 2025 Statewide Internet Portal Authority, or SIPA,
Again.
SIPA micro grant application. And we'll start with that one. And please feel free to introduce yourselves for those who are also joining us online.
Well, I can only speak for the first item. I'm Christy Klipka, and I'm the Grants and Partnerships Innovation Fellow for Business Innovation and Technology. And then online, we have Katie Gathright, our Innovation Program Manager, and Amber Dower, a Senior Grants Analyst with the SIF team. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves or?
You can jump ahead.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
So we are asking for approval to apply for, accept, and supplement the budget if we're awarded for up to $10,000 in funding to purchase common look licenses through the SIPA micro grant program. We would be able to purchase approximately 10 licenses, and these would help us continue our efforts to comply with digital accessibility law by remediating PDFs and other digital content. A little bit of background about the program. It provides funding for one-time technology costs up to $10,000. It has no match. Last year, BIT was awarded approximately $2,000 for biometrics devices, so fingerprint readers on your computer. And then there was a separate grant program through SIPA that was a digital accessibility grant program where we were awarded 25 common look licenses, which is how we kind of piloted this software to see if we liked it. And through that, we have been able to remediate over 317 documents or 1,960 pages worth of content to make sure it's digitally accessible. We have confirmed that applicants are allowed to submit more than one application to SIPA, so we're fine to submit with clerk and recorder as long as they're for different projects. With that, I will open it up for questions and thank you for your consideration.
Great. Yes.
Thank you. I just want to double check, since this is a SIPA micro grant application and we just heard about a SIPA micro grant application, we're not competing against ourselves. These are 2 different SIPA micro grant applications.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Great question.
Well, we've had about 4 or 5
Yeah.
before this, in the same year. I think we're at like number 7 now. So, I say go for it, all the time, as much as possible, because, it's a robust fund and, a lot of communities don't apply for those funds. And, there's nothing that says that you can't put in multiple applications. I do worry that, because of the number that we're putting in, it might lessen our chances, but, I'm all for it. Do it anyway.
Commissioner Curry, you in support?
Also,
3 in support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you. Next up, we have the purchase policy and contract policy amendments and delegation authority.
Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you both.
We're some of the culprits for the 75 minutes.
Nice. Plot thickens. Now we know Vera and Mary.
And I'm Mary O'Neill. I'm the Director of Grants and Procurement, and I'm joined today by Vera Brakeman. She is the Purchasing Operations Manager, and we'll be reviewing some recommended changes to the purchasing policy. And could we just go to the PowerPoint? I think that might be a little bit easier. And you can go to the next page. All right.
Mary, I'm sorry, just to clarify, in terms of the attachments, there are 4. So if we want to see the proposed changes, it's under purchasing policy revised with the actual track changes
yeah,
or what you're proposing.
Yeah, it's right there. It's the red lines in there too. Okay, so First, we just want to talk about why we're bringing this forward now. The policy hasn't been updated since 2019, which is a long time ago. There was an intention to bring it back to the board in 2020, and things went a little haywire back then, so it didn't happen. There was a pandemic. And one of the biggest issues with the current policy is that it instructs people on how to do things in JD Edwards, which is our prior ERP system. And so that causes a lot of confusion, as you can imagine, and rework. So we're here today and we're happy to be able to talk to you about this. And let's go to the next page, please. We did approach this with a collaborative intent, and we were strategic about how we went forward. It was a 2-year effort, and it was led by Vera and also by Chandra Hardwick, who is one of the senior purchasing agents in purchasing. We worked with the procurement roundtable, and we worked with all of our departments and offices in the county, and we had a lot of engagement with internal stakeholders. We also everything that we do is focusing on alignment and efficiency and best practices. So we're on that path, and we will continue to be on that path. We had countywide outreach, and you can see in this chart the different groups that we did work with extensively in terms of getting approval and support for this update. We had the finance leadership team, executive leadership. We had our purchasing stakeholders group, which is that procurement roundtable, and we had met with them in 5 sessions over 18 months. And then with Joe's county management leadership team. Next slide, please. And this just gives you a list of the folks who had all the fun of sitting in the 2 years worth of meetings, just to put some names to who worked on the team. The objectives are listed here too. We wanted to make sure that everyone who is affected by this policy had input, had an opportunity to weigh in. We wanted to streamline the processes. We wanted to align it with Workday and then modernize and clarify some of the outdated policies. And so now I'll go into some of the actual changes that were made. First, this has to do with the department and role updates. We're changing the name from purchasing operations to strategy, information, and finance procurement. Designating Vera, the purchasing ops manager, as the recipient for supplier protests, and that just helps to streamline things. This next little piece here is actually being addressed in another policy, so you can disregard that about the emergency leader. Let's go to the next slide, please. You're ahead of me, aren't you? This is on process and procedure clarifications. The term best value is causing some confusion among the different parties who work on this, the departments, the county attorneys, and our staff. So we removed that to streamline it a bit. We clarified that the purchasing ops manager has the authority to sign purchase order change orders and terminations. And we updated special notifications and review requirement charts just to make sure that we were only adding that step in when it was actually needed. We took a look at thresholds and system alignment, and the contract and purchase order approval thresholds were modified and so that they aligned with Workday. So we made those two systems match, the policy and the system. We created the Appendix C, and that gives us some additional detailed procedures and guidance. And we updated special authority change orders. And really, change orders is one of the areas where we've had a lot of hiccups just with regard to the way the policy had traditionally been handled and written. And I think there was always the idea that, well, people are doing calculations anyway, so they can just go ahead and calculate these things. And then when you're trying to apply that into a system, it just doesn't play nicely. So what we've done there is we've capped at 10% the original value. We removed an outdated change order chart, and then we added more scenarios to Appendix C. The next part is on administration and ethical clarifications. We have moved the P-card administration over to the finance team, so they're handling that now. And it's not, but we're working with them closely. We added clarification allowing conflict of interest exclusions, and we strengthened the code of ethics. Looking ahead,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you just touch on just a little bit more of the conflict of interest exclusions? I was reading that in the.
There's more clarifications. I think when people are on panels to review RFPs, that it's very clear who can and should not be on a panel, that there is a possible or perceived conflict of interest. So it's really more about clarifications.
And making sure we have it in writing.
Correct.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Looking ahead, when we were going through this process, we were really ambitious at the beginning and we had a slate of changes that we wanted to make and we needed to slow our roll a little bit. So looking ahead, we do have some additional efficiencies that we're considering, some that could really significantly decrease the amount of time it takes to purchase or to go through the process from requisition to contract. When we did this analysis a couple of years ago, it was showing savings in staff time of about $300,000 a year. And we'll take that up again in early 26 and see if we can bring that forward to you at that time. Our recommendation for today is to move the purchasing policy forward to a hearing. And if we get that formal approval at the hearing, then we would begin implementation with our teams. And we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great. Commissioners, any questions about what we've heard or the changes?
There's also one amendment to the existing contract and delegation authority policy that changes to align with the proposed amendments in this policy. It changes who can terminate a contract, so it's delegating it to purchasing manager. So we had to update a second policy to accommodate these changes. So if okay, you'll get both policies for consideration at the future hearing.
Well, huge thanks for all the work. This is no small feat, that's for sure. So thank you for presenting and also thank you to the team who worked on this.
Thank you.
Good support, all in support. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Nice to see you both.
Commissioners, I would really like to recognize Mary and Vera and their team. What they summarized in 10 minutes really doesn't do justice to the amount of work and time and discussions that they've had with all of the stakeholders that they shared. And so I know it's been a long haul. I'm glad we're getting this first part completed, but you folks really persevered. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. And next up, we've got our first quarter 2025 budget report presented by Dan.
Well, Commissioners, I think what we're starting to see here is a variety of the activities that takes place in SIF. I think often we're kind of behind the scenes. It's quite extensive and a lot of ducks on the pond kind of activities. So I'm glad you're getting a chance to have some of the folks and see the work they're working on. I'm very proud of everybody in this department. So here today on this item to provide you the first quarter budget report update. I've just asked Sherry to sit at the table with me, even though she's not listed, but the budget team's on the phone as well. The whole team pulls this information together and works with our department. This is the same information you've seen before. So I will go through and provide you some updates. As a reminder, this is the first quarter report. So this represents data that's collected through March. The bottom line takeaway here is that the majority of the data that's being reported by department and fund is fairly comparable with prior this point last year. The variances that we do see, the factors that basically are similar, that continues to be delays in availability of materials, supplies, staffing vacancies, and for the most part, timing of projects. There are really no significant concerns at this point. And countywide spending should really increase as the year progresses, as we normally see, especially as those projects, those major construction things get underway in the summer months. So what you have are two reports. One is, we'll go for the first one, and that's focusing on the general fund expenditures by department. And there's a table of contents there that provide you details for each of those areas within the general fund. If you go to just the first summary slide, I think that's the next. So this gives you an overview of each department. Again, that little year-to-date mark is just an indicator, does not any expectation of where spending should be, but it just gives you kind of a scale. And the blue dashed box, it's a little bit hard to see probably on the screen. That represents where we were at this time last year compared to the green bar of where we are this year. So for the most part, you can see we're generally on pace where we have been. I'll just mention that our revenue, which isn't reflected on the slide, but our revenue, approximately 43% of that tax and license revenue has been collected through the end of March, which is in line with those expectations, primarily since property taxes are collected mainly in February and then again in June. Investment income is a little bit lower than expected, but that's primarily in this report because the March revenue had not been captured in the system yet. Other revenue is pretty much in line with expectations. In terms of expenditures, our salary expenditures are slightly lower than they were this time last year, mainly due to some vacancies in a few areas, like the sheriff's office. But all other spending is pretty much in line with the 2024 year-to-date figures. So let's talk about some other notable differences by department or office. The county commissioners' salaries is slightly under the 24 year-to-date expenditures and that 25 year-to-date mark, primarily due to an open position that will not be filled. So that's just kind of giving an indication of that variance. Bid spending is below that 25% mark, but slightly higher in the first quarter than last year. This is primarily due to some maintenance and software licenses needing to be processed. Clerk and recorder had decreased spending in 25 due to the election cycle, but more spending last year due to elections. Coroner, so their supplies are a little bit higher at this point due to increase in annual deaths. So that's a sad driver, but that drives directly to our costs. County Attorney's Office did begin an implementation, software implementation project, Time Matters, to convert it. And otherwise that spending is in line with the 24 levels. Human Resources is just below that mark, but slightly higher than this time last year due to some timing of supplies purchases and some subscription payments. The operations within the general fund, it's typically low in the first quarter as that department is ramping up projects for the year. We see a lot of that kicking in during the summer. Parks and Conservation, that spending generally decreases during the increases during the warmer months, but it's slightly higher at this point last year to some recovery efforts associated with the Quarry Fire.
And just a point of order. I know Mira Kay's trying to.
Oh, I'm sorry,
keep
we're
track of
looking
what
at that.
slide you're on.
I thought we were still on the summary slide.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. We're
The second page, I think.
this one.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily talking about every group, just ones that have some notable differences, and the details are available on those slides. You're like, what's happening? All right. Under public affairs, those expenditures are largely in line with prior year's levels. And it's just the differences are due to timing of spending. The Sheriff's Office, I mentioned, also has some lower spending in the first quarter due to vacancies. But capital expenditures is higher at this point due to some continuation projects that they had from last year that didn't get started until late last year. Within SIF, spending is pretty close to that annual mark, a little bit higher due to some supply purchases. Treasurer spending is close to the mark, except for their other services category. This was unique because there essentially are no bank fee charges in Q1 because they had earning credits which offset those charges. So that's kind of a good and a bad thing.
The blue seemed to be the highest out of all
Yeah.
the categories.
Yeah, right.
It's the extension of the blue dotted line. Okay.
Public health, both the revenue expenditures are slightly lower from this time last year, but it's more about the timing of the activity. As of March 31st, all those programs are still fully funded. And then on the non-departmental category, those are things that don't fall within a particular operational area. That's mostly where we handle like end of year transactions. So the revenue actually shows a negative amount because it was just the timing of when we pulled the data is a typical in and out transaction that accounting had done, and it was already been reversed. So it just happened to be the timing of the data pull, but that's totally normal. It just happened to be the timing. And the expenditures we don't really see to the end of the year. So that's going to be like when we transfer dollars to the patrol fund from the general fund or the public health fund. That all happens at the end of the year because we're waiting for that actual cost of transfer. So that category kind of remains blank for most of the year. So the next, again, overall, the general funds, pretty much where we're expected to be, nothing of concern, just wanted to go through those, some of those variances. Any questions on the general fund? First quarter report. Okay. And as always, I say it every time, first quarters, take it for what it is because it's, it's just one quarter worth. So the second report breaks down our budget to actuals by departments and funds. So it'll include multiple funds because it's not all just general fund. So if we go to that summary slide, it shows the full colors. It's 3 on the document, but
3?
Yeah, you gotta go probably multiple pages. It looks like you're still in the general fund, so you're probably gonna have to go 20 or 30 pages out.
But it's actually, I think.
Or is it a separate document?
It's the second one.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was one
Department
PDF.
expenditures.
There you go.
Yep, it's the third one.
That's it. And if you can maybe
Thanks,
zoom
guys.
in for the width of it, and then we can scroll down as we go through it. All right, so I'll jump in. Overall, this one, the first one shows the revenues by fund. There, again, as I mentioned before, most of our revenue supported through property tax, the general fund, road and bridge, social services, et cetera. They've received well over their 25% mark because that's typically the flow when property taxes come in first part of the year, so it's front loaded. So that's pretty much where we're at with the revenue. The expenditure side, the next one shows the expenditure. So if we want to go to that next table, I would zoom in on that one. Next page. Sorry. Oh, I thought it was in there. Did I not see the revenue?
Is that the 2025 first quarter budget snapshot expenditures by fund?
Yeah.
January.
Was that where you were? I'm
It's-
sorry, my fault. You're there.
It's right after this.
Yeah, you're on it. So if you could zoom in a little bit.
This one?
That's it. So countywide expenditures, again, these are all funds in all departments. They're a little bit less than the 25 mark, but that's totally in line with where we were this time last year. Other than salaries, most of the expenditures will most likely take place later in the year as those projects ramp up and vendors start to invoice us and they're paid. Just a note that the team wanted me to pass on is that the timing of the data pulls on these reports typically will affect the revenue reports more than expenditures because revenue is a lot more volatile and doesn't come in on a normal sequence than expenditures. So just important to recognize that they're not necessarily always going to line up.
Could you talk a little bit about the insurance line and why that one is so different? At 66%, it's kind of beyond even the blue dots.
Yeah, it
It's
was,
just down a little bit.
Enterprise and internal service.
Right there.
it was just due to claims. There were no specific large claims, just the timing of payments for claims and also prepayment of premiums, just the time, they just paid them earlier. So it's just high for this time of year. It's not, they don't expect it to be high for the year.
Yeah, you can see it was this high this time last year, but not as high. So it's. So let's go through some of the expenditure variances of note. The clerk and recorder, if you want to scroll back up a little bit, or there just on the table. Yeah. Clerk and recorder e-filing fund expenditures. Those, and make sure I'm seeing that, that's on the revenue. We want to go to the expenditure.
Pardon me?
We're on the revenue summary. We want to go to the one that looks
I
like
should
this.
color code them.
It
for
makes
next
it a little,
year.
for next time, we'll make that a little easier. That's it. That's the one we're looking for. Yeah, they're eerily similar. So the clerk and recorder e-filing fund, they're a little bit lower than the 25 mark, but this is usually used for equipment purchases. And they're basically replenished as needed. So that's nothing of too much concern. Looking at the inmate welfare fund, that's revenue that's received through commissary sales and telephone services at the jail. Both receipts and expenditures are lower than this point last year, but that could be due to timing or simply utilization. Opioid custodial fund. This is a new fund compared to last year. This revenue is obviously from those settlement payments that are distributed by the Secretary of State. And this will come in a few lump sums throughout the year. So that's how the revenue kind of flows in. And the grantees for this fund are still being selected for 25. So the dollars aren't out the door fully yet.
And Dan, may I clarify for the opioid custodial fund, does that include the Jeffco dollars plus the GROC dollars? Are they both combined in this fund or is it one or the other?
No, this does not include the GROC dollars. This is
It's just Jeffco.
County settlement. Okay. The American Rescue Plan Act Fund and the Rescue Plan Project Fund. Those are kind of interrelated, but many of the projects that were being carried under ARPA fund have now been transferred into the Rescue Plan Project Fund as the ARPA criteria has run its course. And the ARPA activity will decrease eventually as we spend on the rest of those dollars. They're all committed under contract, so it's not anything new in ARPA. The Solid Waste Emergency Reserve, that fund, those are expenditures that are mainly for contract services, and they could vary throughout the year. So that's why we see some variance now.
Can you go back up? What's contingent? I don't know what that is.
So we have a contingent fund, and it's kind of strange to show contingent fund and the forfeiture fund. We don't have appropriations in those funds. If there are any dollars, it's just how much they are. The contingent fund, we have to have by statute, but we don't really utilize it very much. So there's just some administrative costs into it. That's one of those funds that we've explored. Do we want to start to leverage that? But they're really dollars set aside for governor declared emergencies. And so it's really limited use. So that's on this report, since we're showing actuals compared to budget, it's a little difficult to capture something that doesn't really have a budget in it. So that's why I just kind of, we can leave that blank. We went back and forth. Should we leave that blank or should we just bring it to the year-to-date mark? Go either way, but it's essentially there's a few dollars in that.
It's just money that's sitting there, basically.
Yeah, and we could pull up the details if we need to look at how much is in there, but it's not significant.
It was, the budget is small and the expenditures are small. It's just a percentage. So the expenditures, it just looks huge, but it's just a minor amount and I can get you details if you like.
No,
Okay.
you.
And the forfeiture fund, just for reference, by statute, we're not permitted to actually appropriate that fund. So it's one of the oddities. And the prior sheriff educated me thoroughly on that reality. But that's the forfeiture dollars come from dollars that are through seizure, profferency, forfeiture. So, and that typically that's typically split between the sheriff and DA, but primarily the sheriff utilizes those dollars. Let's talk a little bit about the developmentally disabled fund. Those are expenditures a little bit lower than they were this time last year. And those are typically around services that aren't really received until mid-April or invoices until mid-April.
Yeah.
The traffic impact funds, there's a selection of those. Those variances are due to timing. And expenditures really won't happen until a project has been identified and then work takes place. So the revenues coming in at different intervals, but the expenditures move forward. Although you can see at this point in the year, they're doing okay. If you were to use that 25 mark as a gauge. Wildland Fire Fund, that's a relatively small fund that has a vacancy largely because there was a vacant position that was not filled until late 2024. And then that's kind of spilled into 2025, but it's still within the budget. Insurance and workers' comp expenditures are higher due to claims. We already talked about that, and some early premium payments. And then finally, debt service. Both the open space debt service and Southeast sales tax debt services have been retired. So they're still listed here because we had data from the prior year. So those are just some highlights that we wanted to mention in terms of the expenditure report for the first quarter. And if there's any questions on the specific departments, we'd be happy to, or funds, we'd be happy to answer those or follow up with you.
Any questions, or did we get most of them out along the way? Thank you so much for the presentation. Really
Exciting, I
appreciate
know.
it. No, it's good. We really appreciate it. It's great to stay on top of it. and
Absolutely.
No surprises is
That's
our
the
motto.
good
so.
That's what we like. So thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Next, we have the 2025 Developmentally Disabled Fund Budget and Appropriation.
So I am Sherry Wilger. I am a senior budget analyst with the Strategy, Innovation, and Finance Department. And I'm here today to request an increase to the Developmentally Disabled Fund. As you know, this fund and mill levy exist to provide services for the developmentally disabled community within Jefferson County. The services are provided through the DDRC contract, Developmental Disabilities Resource Center. During 2025 budget development, we conservatively set the budget at about 12.3 million. The final mill levy certification value came in at 13.3 million. We are requesting that the budget for this fund be increased to be in alignment with the anticipated revenue. And we are recommending that this item be placed on a future consent agenda to increase the budget and appropriation by $987,123.
Well, in light of some of our earlier conversations, it's actually
Yes.
nice to see this number up. Commissioners, are you in support?
Yeah, just quickly, is there any thought as to where what it would probably go to?
The specific services, I don't have information. I know that they are overwhelmed and would spend over the budget. I don't know specifically what the amount is being spent on. Do you happen to know? I don't think she, so yeah, I'm doing the budget side. I don't have information. on the
Okay.
services side.
Nope, Mary Bird would be.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm a thumbs up either way, just
Okay.
curious as if there was thoughts as to where of the many high needs, if there's one or two that are.
I know, they told me some of the things they provide and it's just,
It's mind-blowing.
yeah, it's just,
Marathon.
it's vast.
Staggering.
The types of programs that they provide is like need-based rather than here's the curriculum.
Commissioners, if you have an interest, we could certainly get greater clarity from Mary if you'd like.
Are you okay supporting now, though?
Yeah, oh, yes, I'm absolutely, but yeah, that would,
I can ask her to follow up with an email later this week.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
All three in support. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Next up, we have operations. We've got 4 items. We've got about 35 minutes for this topic. And Kristen Heath is with us. Welcome. Good to see you, Kristen, to talk about community correction supplemental.
Good morning. Yeah, so I am here to ask for an approval to increase our contract with our community corrections vendor. And this is all pass-through dollars from the state. We've been monitoring the contract and we're on track to overspend the original appropriation from the state by approximately $150,000. So we're just looking for approval to accept those funds and have a supplemental to our budget.
Big, strong yes for me. Not surprising, especially given the increase in cases that we've been seeing, we've been wrestling with. We've actually added community correction meetings to respond to the high demand. So commissioners, questions in support? Okay, all three in support. Thanks for being here. Nice to see you. And also under the topic of operations, we have remote work policy amendments, and our Deputy County Manager, Kate Newman, will be presenting those.
This is an amendment to the remote work. We have found that some more definition around Colorado resident was necessary. Right now, this policy allows for remote work outside of the state for certain amounts of time due to our limitations in our payroll system and workers' comp insurance. We don't have the system set up to pay out of state residents and understand the impacts from their tax, all the various tax codes in different states and workers' comp. So we limit the time to limit our risk. But we wanted to put some more parameters around what a resident was. We pulled in the red lines, and to define living in Colorado. We're mirroring the states and a lot of the language that we see to get driver's license, et cetera. As the language we plugged into this policy, again, just to help provide those guidelines for supervisors when allowing outside, remote work outside of the state. Any questions on that one?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, just wondering, what did we do during COVID?
We adopted this policy. Yeah, it was kind of a wake-up call. Oh, it is possible, it's some flexibility. So this allows remote work in state, if it's agreed to by your supervisor, if it's okay with your type of job. Some jobs don't allow for remote work. But we also allowed out-of-state work, but also for limited time. And recently, over the last 3 or 4 months, we updated this to kind of define that length of time a little bit more. I'm always finding loopholes. I'm always trying to tighten up for supervisors to have that guidance. And now we're needing to see a need to add the resident stuff. But yeah, it was definitely brought to our attention, remote work need during COVID.
And Kate, I have two quick items under 3A, the second to the last line in A. I think, do we mean to say or prior to performing work outside? It looks like it's an O on mine.
Oh, okay. I'll catch that.
Do we mean or there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then one other thing, under E1, the word regulations. This needs a little tweak.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And do these, do you envision that these changes, just tightening of the language, would have any impact on critical employees who have been contributing to Jeffco or make any difference on that front?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Okay, great. Just being more clear and helping our team. Okay.
Yeah, and this version and previous versions maintains, there's always exceptions for ADA accommodations or any other kind of state laws. So that's always that's still in the we haven't changed. These changes won't impact those kinds of exceptions.
Okay, perfect. Commissioners, are you in support?
Yes.
Okay, thumbs up from me, all in support. Okay. And then Kate, you've got the next one too, driving on county business policy amendments.
Right. Fleet is undergoing, our existing policy allows GPS data to be used to monitor safety of the drivers in our vehicles and how they're handling it. We don't monitor day to day, but it does produce reports for excessive speeding or hard corners, stopping short. So we do monitor the safety of our drivers' habits. We are finding, we are currently exploring GPS units. It's time to renew the contract. We're finding most of them now have a video capability, which will aid us in when we do have unfortunate accidents, because we can see the surroundings and it'll help our claims on some of those things. But we wanted to amend this policy so the drivers are aware that at some point GPS capabilities will have video that we'll be able to use in our vehicles and equipment.
I was going to ask, if we had any issues with excessive speeding among elected officials, and then I realized I was the only elected official with that problem, so. But not the county vehicle. Yeah, so I'm gonna even, I was gonna serve that one up, then I thought, no, just.
That you know of.
Great. I think this makes a whole lot of sense. Any questions or comments? No. It wasn't super excessive, just for the record, okay?
We'll bring these amendments to those two policies
Okay.
to future hearing.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Appreciate your work on these. And there's another one, non-county agency and program funding.
This is a continuation of a discussion we had 6 weeks ago or so about in-cap funding. As you recall, in 2024, we went through a budget reduction exercise. Several of our contracts were reduced to help capture or help contain our expenses during, while we were considering budget reductions. So, there's a presentation on this. Can you skip down to that one? So during that reduction time, this is just an overview of the program. So awards can be based on public funds, interests of public safety, health and well-being, and can be contracts or services, discretionary purchase, or dues. The table shows the actual reductions. It's kind of cutting off a couple. Is there a way to unzoom? This just shows the actual number or the amount of reductions that these agencies went under or were reduced to. And the next page, when we discussed it a few weeks ago, we were considering, well, what amount of that budget is the county's funding? So I went back and you'll see the tables in the briefing paper of each individual agency. It was a lot of kind of comparing apples to oranges here, but essentially this table captures what percentage of the NCAP funding, the reduced amount, is their total budget. I'd also asked each agency because we'll need to amend these contracts, and since we're halfway through the year, what that would impact them. And they all said, we don't care, we would like additional funding. So they all saw a need for additional funding, and that they would be able to spend it in this year. So,
but Kate, just to clarify, we're still going to go through our process that we do every year, right? Where they submit an application, they talk about their successes or challenges.
Right. So this is just for your consideration if you wanted to change the 2025 funding.
I gotcha. Well, and also I will just share, with the board, as you know, we're doing everything that we can to potentially prevent the closure of the Boys and Girls Club in Jefferson County, after the county has made investments year after year after year, in the past totaling $50,000. And of course, you can see that it was reduced here. And we have one more meeting with the school district and other partners to see if there's a way we can brave funding that may include a slight increase potentially in funding, at least for the first year, as a bridge to do some more longer term planning for the Boys and Girls Club. But I just want to flag that for we will know more. Number of meetings this week, but it's coming up quickly, and we've been working to tie up those loose ends.
Kate, I do have a question on the Boys and Girls Club. The figure of the 22 million, is that accurate, or is that the larger?
It's Metro Denver. It's not the share of the budget that's for Jefferson County Services. It's the entire agency.
So that's how much that's their overall budget for each organization. Okay, thanks, Joe, for asking that. And then what percentage is that?
So if you would like to consider increasing or restoring any of these contracts to the 2024 budget amount, we'll have to go and do some math to see if a supplemental is required. A lot of our obligatory, agencies came in over budgets, some of the IGAs. So, and then we also moved the department budget from the BCC over to county manager or to operations. So usually budgets roll up and it's enough to cover any overages like what we had with some of our IGAs. But so we might have to do some budget steps, but there would be a funding available in different pots of money, but there would be a process. So, but before we get into the details, if you were interested in restoring the amount to 2024, I would go back and work with the budget team and the county attorney's team, amend those contracts, and also figure out what funding process we need to supplement or amend that budget.
My gut feeling is in light of our earlier conversation and what we're seeing at the federal level, especially the human services components, I would be inclined, if we have those dollars, to look at continuing funding as we had in the prior year before we looked at these cuts. And then I would just like to flag the Boys and Girls Club. Still a question mark in terms of dollars, what that potentially could look like. But again, subject to the approval of the board, if we think that's but that's a good investment in terms of potentially some additional dollars there. The Senior Resource Center, I did hear you say all of them, of course, would like to see those dollars restored as well. And the Senior Resource Center and EDC have been the largest organizations that we funded. EDC, I understand. Senior Resource Center. Is there anything you'd say about that, Kate, and why they've received a significant portion? They do excellent work. That's not the question, but.
And we also, just a reminder too, are assisting the Senior Resource Center with property. Right now, they've asked for to reuse the property that we've donated to them for affordable housing to also receive more income.
I will point out something I learned at the Senior Heroes Award.
Yes.
Is we are the only county that doesn't have a senior resource office as a part of our county operations. The only one in the state, by the way. And that's because we rely on the Seniors Resource Center for those purposes.
Interesting.
So when I heard about some of the other counties and what they do at their level, I think in light of this, I would be very in favor of supporting it and returning it back to 2024 because they basically do the work for us that we are not budgeting for or doing on our part. And for a county of our size, it's kind of surprising, quite frankly. And I was not aware that we were the only county that didn't do that or have a position of that nature. So
I thought we did have aging adult representation through Human Services at least 7 years ago, 6.5 years ago.
Yeah.
There were one or two women who led that effort. It was the Live Well Colorado initiative. That was one of the areas that they worked on. Well, it sounds like there's support from all three of us.
Yes, I agree. At least 2024 levels. And also where possible, and I don't know exactly 2025 requested or where like the typical percentage increases would happen. That would be my preference, but at least at the 2024 levels. Two caveats. You've already mentioned Boys and Girls Club. So that caveat, however that works out. Jeffco EDC. So in light of a letter we received from the executive director yesterday, there could potentially be some vacancy savings there this year. Kind of hard to predict out exactly and everything, but if when we get down to individual dollars, that might be a bit of a caveat for us to think of and look at. One other thing, this goes back to our conversation yesterday, Kate, so Kate brought up before that some of the mock trial competitions that use our courtrooms have come in, used our courtrooms. They generally do it on the weekends when the building is closed, and typically the county, our operations have just kind of absorb those costs, which are in the range of about $2,000 for the weekend between security and janitorial services. And I know that Kate is negotiating, working with the courts, working with these groups. And then there's also the piece that It's always during the school year, which about half the time there is the possibility of snow. And if there's a snow event, it could add about $3,000 of costs to the county. And so Kate's been working on that. I also have been reached out from the University of Colorado mock trial team. You might have some people who have connections there. That they host, have been hosting on a yearly basis a fairly large regional competition. And they're looking, they heard that Jeffco has these courtrooms sometimes available on weekends. And so they reached out to me to see if that's a possibility. They had a weekend in mind in October, which had a high risk of snow events, but possibilities. So what I wanted to just kind of put out there is that perhaps, since we are talking non-county agency and program requests, also knowing that there are different entities that host these events, they wouldn't be able, there's just no way of them being able to, over a year ahead, putting in the request process that we normally go through, but that we look at. And of course, we need to go through our attorneys to see if this is even a possibility of us spending money on this or setting aside money. But that possibly we could look at some and setting aside a little bit of NCAP money each year to be able to allow these programs to come in either at a reduced rate or even for free. I know, like when the Jeffco mock trial folks, or I think it's a regional, but it's primarily Jeffco schools. You know, I think there's a pretty good connection there that these are mostly Jeffco students, Jeffco families, and we can definitely draw a line there. Obviously, if CU coming in and they're hosting teams from not just around Colorado, but also other states, that is a little bit more tenuous of a direct connection there and stuff. But I'd just like to put out there that maybe this is a possibility of an area where we could put forward a couple $1,000s that we might be able to have and it's not just coming directly out of operations. And but obviously, again, we need to make sure that it would be legal to do that, and also know that it would probably be a different process than the rest of it. We ask all the other groups to go through.
And Andy, just to clarify, those potential dollars would be as soon as this October. We're talking, are you talking about October 2025?
Yeah.
And subsequent years if it is approved by the CAO's office?
Yeah, and I think the high school groups, would they be this calendar year, Kate?
Yes, they would, there would be snow in October now, so.
Right.
October 1st, I'm sure.
I know.
Yeah.
So, when we go through looking at the budget and all the processes that have to happen to increase those contracts, we can look at that as well. And then what county attorney's office, which brings me to slide.
Well, before
6. Okay.
But before we move on, I had one other thought. Not that I wanted to advocate for less money for these things, but it's my understanding that Porchlight could have possibly received some additional funding as a result of the ballot measure that went through with regard to that.
Public safety component?
Yeah, it was some sort of a tax and family tree as well. It was a sales tax. No, it wasn't sales tax. It was on the manufacturer or the distributor of firearms. that is supposed to go towards.
Oh, legislative. Is
Yeah.
that a legislative?
No, it was,
statewide
it was a
ballot?
statewide ballot.
Statewide ballot. I
measure.
was thinking 1A.
Yeah.
Statewide ballot. That
And-
makes sense.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, and it did pass, and there was supposed to be some potential revenue benefits toward organizations like Family Tree and Porchlight for the benefit of services supporting domestic violence. And so, again, not that I'm advocating for lessening their budget or restoring it back to the 24, because I don't believe that they will have received those revenues yet. But going forward for next year for our NCAP process, I think we should bear that in mind. Because I do believe that they might be getting some additional support through that tax measure, in which case I can think of some other areas that are either not here or need to be here because of some of those federal changes that we had just talked about this morning, where there might be some greater cutbacks that might be concerning. In particular, I'm thinking about the cut at the statewide level regarding food banks and food pantries that just came through. And then there are additional cutbacks that are happening at the federal level with regard to SNAP. So those two things combined means that we're going to have more food insecurity in our county and in our state. And so we might want to be thinking about that. And if there are some offsets because there's other revenue coming into some of these other areas, I think that might offer some balance.
I think that's a great point. I think that's a really good point. And I think as the numbers begin to take more shape for those two entities, it'll be good to talk that through. And then the other piece I think about is greater food insecurity as well. And perhaps that's another area that we want to think about for this list.
Because those potential cuts that are happening at the federal level to SNAP will likely increase costs. And so we'll have to balance the increase in those costs with our ability to deliver services. So we're probably going to have to cut back how many people we can serve in order to balance those increasing costs. The state budget just made some significant cuts to food pantries and food banks.
Right.
And so that's an area that I know that the Action Center, for example, is heavily involved with. And so it might necessitate a greater increase in the Action Center next year, as well as the addition of some direct support for those programs.
One thing we could do too, in light of this, the food insecurity piece specifically, is talk with the food task force that was created during COVID. Remember, we all participated in that, to get their best thinking around sort of a shared approach to food insecurity and how does that make the most sense as we think about all of these different organizations across Jeffco that are trying to assist on that front and are grappling with how they're going to navigate these cuts for families in need, because that need has not gone away. So maybe we could do some more investigation as we do this work with them.
Can you advance it 2 slides?
What would the model look like for that if we were to add them to this list?
So that brings us to the next section, the next question for
And
direction.
I'm sorry, Kate, I know you're trying to, but I wanted to, one thing, I'll just say from my perspective, and exactly as you said, not trying to take money away from anyone. My perspective has always been that both EDC and Porchlight, the thought was of putting more money up front from us to help them get up and running. And then over time, our financial support would actually decrease. And I believe in both cases, at least since I've been here, other than last year when we made some cuts, that has not, well, maybe with Porchlight, it was decreased once or twice, but in general, I don't think that has really been the case. But that's my perspective, is that the original thought in both those cases were money to help get them up and running. And then over time, the financial support from the county would decrease. So just wanted to make sure that gets said every once in a while.
Yeah, no, you are right about that. That is true. And I know, in having some conversations about that over time, with EDC, there has also been another point that has been made that Jeffco and this is something, I don't know this for a fact, we have to investigate it further, but Jefferson County already invests a fairly low amount of dollars compared to other size counties with an economic development corporation. But I'd like to see the data points on that and the numbers. So I think both of those are really good points. Okay, so lots of, some additional work as we move forward with this. Do you have, go ahead, Kate.
Well, so this is so for direction, guessing yes, go ahead and open up the 2026 NCAP process. So we'd start receiving get the website up the rest of this month, start receiving applications. Applications would close in June. And then I'd fold it into the budget process with recommendations. And that's where you would decide, the exact dollar amounts per each agency. The next slide. Existing budget is 2.3 million. There are some discretionary and required agencies, and the required agencies kind of fluctuate. So we'll have to look at what the original estimate is that comes in. And those are the ones that are those are our IGAs and DRCOG fees and those kind of things that aren't negotiable right now. And the next page.
Kate, I have a real quick question. North Fork Fire is part of that unification plan along with Elk Creek and who am I forgetting? Skip Sherlaw's Inner Canyon. And the North Fork Fire receives PILT dollars. So I don't know if that reunification changes that at all. I don't know that it does necessarily, but I would just flag that for us to look at.
Yeah, it's on my list to look at.
Cool.
I had flagged the changes in policy for DRCOG for us to investigate and determine if we supported a particular course or what the implications were. And I never heard back on the conclusion of that. So I forwarded it just to say, hey, we might want to be aware that they're anticipating some changes. And I don't know from our perspective if we think some of these changes are good or bad. And I definitely don't know what DRCOG landed on.
Yeah.
So
Commissioners, as relates to follow up there, so I did reach out to DRCOG, and we have yet to schedule a meeting to connect on that. But Rex in particular was very keen on having a conversation with us. And my based on the email exchange, I don't believe that they've landed on one in particular at this point.
Okay.
But as soon as I have that meeting, then I'll follow forward.
I think it's timely because any proposed changes will go through the board. And if we are not happy with a particular route, we need to be prepared to advocate for that or not.
Agreed.
If we say, no, this shift is going to not be good for us, we need to be able to articulate that at the meetings so that hopefully we can persuade other people to vote with us. I just didn't, to be frank, understand what they were proposing, what the difference was and why. So I was perplexed by the changes because I didn't understand them.
And the next slide is, I was going to ask for direction if you wanted to, open the application process. So yes, from our earlier discussions. I didn't also wanted to see if you wanted program parameters. Right now, the applications are open up. We get a wide range. They could be anything. I was going to ask if you want to narrow that down. Earlier, we heard food banks and food pantries. We've been talking a lot about, the federal funding and impacts from any kind of decrease there. We've also heard 15-year housing plan. you know, could be a climate action plan connection. So I was just wondering if you had any more direction that you wanted to narrow down and kind of focus the applications that come in, or also just leave them open. So it's, you know, knowing, you know, the money was 2.3 million, so.
I would definitely say not limiting it to the existing agencies. I would be interested in opening it up to more, just given our conversations that we had earlier. And then I am not clear, are there any parameters right now and what those are? Because without that context, I don't know.
Just the statute limitations is very broad. Provision of goods or services, it has to be in the interest of the public safety, health, and well-being, and that we have a statutory authority.
And I think
So that's, it's very broad.
I think we've also always looked at it with an eye of, can these organizations do the work more efficiently and better than the county can?
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
That's been probably the biggest lens, I think, one of the biggest ones. You know, the funny thing is, I continue to be disappointed that we're not able to look at wildfire grants this year. And part of me wonders if we could add that to NCAP, but I don't think it is the right place to do it. And I do think we should probably keep it. I'm processing out loud in my brain what's going on right now, which is always dangerous. I think we should keep it with the sheriff's office and, you know, open space and that team. You know, they're expanding that team to do this work. But I just, in light of what is happening at a national level, and because we hear so much from our constituents about how important that is, I would have really loved to have gotten that on the ground. I think it's probably not the appropriate place to do it. It's really, for me, the human services components that we've been talking about that are especially attractive as we think about program parameters too.
I agree. And I think it seems like small dollars, but the impact is so big. It's so great. It's meaningful. And then I'm also very interested in the nexus with the 15-year housing plan, in particular regarding homelessness. I know that we're going to have our regional meeting coming up here, but I continue to have conversations with local officials and just the push and the anxiety around the increase in homelessness that is quite frankly exponential. You know, this year's homelessness numbers compared to last year, it's staggering how much it's increased. And when you look at last year's number compared to the year prior, again, it's unbelievable, the increase in the number. So I think that is an emerging problem that is getting more and more urgent and critical. And it kind of, it's connected to so many of these other things. And so I feel quite comfortable supporting these other agencies that are working on it, but there's nothing that explicitly denotes that in particular. And I don't know if there is anything out there in the works. You know, there might be an organization that would be interested in applying that ties to that. So again, going back to your first question about existing agencies or opening it up, I'd say, yeah, definitely open it up. But for me personally, I am probably more keenly interested in that this year than some of the other areas.
And also, just to clarify, we have opened it up way beyond the list that we have, you know? And I think continuing that is smart. I agree with you 100% on that. And I also agree too that the safety net of services that help keep people in their homes, which has been a big part of human services focus, continues to be especially critical at this juncture. In addition to the chronic homelessness, which is very difficult. And also, I think, just as we were talking with Dan earlier, I was like, I know he's here somewhere. There he is. About how the federal decisions affect these different pots of money, GROC and others, 1A and more. I think we need to put the same lens on this and really think strategically about these different pots of money, how we strategically allocate it through these different avenues, 1A, NCAP, you know, not being duplicative or in areas where we do need to double down and we've got a good rationale for it. Because it's a good opportunity.
And I was going to, of those up there, I'd actually say that the transportation public safety 1A nexus is perhaps of what I see up there. I would say that shouldn't be one of our parameters because that has its own, its own
Yeah.
thing going on right now.
Cut that loose.
And quite frankly, that's a much larger number than we're generally, I mean,
Yeah.
like 10 to 20 times larger than we're talking about. So
Yes.
I would say if it's just got the 1A nexus, shouldn't be looking at it with NCAP.
I mean,
But all the
So-
rest of them. And the community reason, well, no, I would just, that would be the one I would do.
That's the safety net. You're talking about safety net
Yeah.
services when you talk about in your money communities. Okay. Do you have what you need, Kate?
Yes, I'll see if I can write the application questions so they at least touch on, you know, which box they're checking and give you some more information when they apply on how they're meeting these goals.
Okay.
And
That's what I want.
in light of what I said earlier about these mock trial groups that have no connection to each other, but conceivably, if we were to go that route, would we need to change any of the language about the application piece, or could we just put it in there that's saying, just for example, we'll put $10,000 aside each year, starting in 2026, for groups that we could help facilities figure out. And that way, they don't actually put in an application, but there's a line item that you might be able to use.
I'll brainstorm with SPA team and county attorney's office, because I have to look at the language and the policy as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Great.
Commissioners, before we move on, Kate, are you prepared to talk about those animal shelters today? We had a conversation with the sheriff. Meeting.
Oh,
The
no, I
suggestion to,
haven't had a conversation on that.
so commissioners, we may be coming back to you regarding Foothills Animal Shelter. I think there's a possibility that we should move that to the sheriff's office budget.
Great. So more to come on that. We're in agreement in terms of what's been shared here and moving this forward for further exploration. And Kate, thank you so much for all of your leadership on this too.
Yeah.
And for the great questions you always ask us in terms of direction and next steps. I think it just makes the program stronger every year. So
I
thank
think we
you for
only
that.
asked for the move, but.
Right,
you know,
right, there's that.
Can't do all of that.
That's right. So next I want to bring up our Director of Transportation, Mike Vanetta. We have one more item that is not reflected on our agenda, but it has to do with a deadline-oriented project and a signature. And Mike, if you want to just spell it out for us, we'll get it taken care of.
Yeah, we had a brief commissioners back in December on a shared cost on a development for a roundabout at Quincy and Tufts or by Home Depot. And then last week we briefed you also and went over that. And the contractor, we're just trying to get a signature to get the contractor moving. They're out there ready to go. And next week it's going to be on the consent agenda for ratification on the board signature. And everybody's itching to move. So we're looking for a signature on the form. And,
It's a reimbursement agreement.
reimbursement, sorry. There's a very low risk on this one. It's once they complete it, we accept the whole project. It comes out of the South Impact Fee Fund. So that's part of the program there. So there's nothing really at risk on our side.
So the Commissioner Dahlkemper, as the board chair, would sign this today, and then the board would ratify her signature next Tuesday as part of the consent agenda.
And it would allow the crews to begin working.
Great. Any questions or concerns?
Are you exact that there are people standing there with shovels in their hand, and as soon as you sign
They
that.
really are. They really are out there.
Ready to go.
Yes, they are.
Hand it to me and
I
have
feel
to
like-
sign it as long as everyone's okay with it. Are you okay? Commissioner Zenzinger with it? Okay, all three in support. Great. Do you want me to just sign it?
I have to get to work.
Okay, great. I just wanted to do a quick time check. We're at 12:10. Normally we would break for lunch, but we've got a couple of reports and I was going to check with commissioners first. Do you have any reports or are they quick? Because we only have one item for executive session and I'm thinking that if we have no reports or short reports, we can get through those efficiently, go to executive session, and then we can wrap up hopefully by 12:30. And then still have, if people still want to get lunch, you can still get lunch. Does that sound good? Do you have reports? Anyone have reports? No, I don't. I don't either. So that takes care of commissioner reports. Excellent work, team. We'll go to Joe.
Commissioners, just one quick update. You've heard us talking a lot about SIPA lately. And so I wanted you to be aware that previously the board had authorized us to submit a SIPA Gov grant in the amount of $96,750. And this is to advance our constituent communication and tracking initiative pilot project. And so we were notified last week that we were awarded that grant. So my congratulations to Renee Bruno, who's been leading that effort with a team of folks. So good news.
Good news to hear. Any reports from the county attorney's office?
No reports, Commissioner, but I do have a brief executive session. So if I may have a motion to go into executive session for the Jefferson Parkway Public Highway Authority for legal advice under 246424B and advice to negotiators pursuant to 246402-4E.
I move to go into executive session for the reasons outlined by the county attorney's office.
Is there a second? And anyone opposed? Seeing no one in opposition, we'll move into executive session next.
And we would suggest leaving the open meeting.
Yeah.
open.
Just talked about it. And we'll come back for more after our.